My name's James Clement. I'm an Executive Director of Mareterram Limited, but I'm also the Chief Operating Officer of the company. And our major assets at this point in time are based in Carnarvon, part of the Shark Bay prawn fishery, where we've got 10 of 18 trawlers that operate within that fishery. We took over a business that has actually been around since the 1960s. We're only the third owner of that particular business. And like a lot of fishing companies and the industry in general, safety, I wouldn't say has been lax, but it hasn't been of the highest priority. So one of the first things we did is, under the new AMSA regulations, we overhauled our vessel safety management systems to the hilt. And then part of that was to do a gap analysis, a safety gap analysis on what was missing. What we really wanted to do is start introducing mandatory wearing of life jackets at sea, which is very difficult culturally. From an industry that traditionally hasn't enforced it. So not only did we provide traditional life jackets on board, but we started to implement some basic yoke style PFDs that, while mandatory, we're trying to get the guys to make sure that it was in their best interest to actually wear these safety devices. Interestingly, we had an incident in the very start of this particular season. The crewman in question had the training and was made aware of our desire for everyone to wear PFDs. It was an innocuous incident. He had hold of a lazy line and it actually backed onto itself onto the winch, and traditionally you can pull that line and it comes back off the winch, and human nature, as it started to actually back on itself rather than let the line go, he held onto it and it lifted him up off the deck, and as it lifted him up off the deck, it was quite rough weather and it swung him off the side of the boat and into the water. At that particular time, it was the middle of the night, so it was past midnight. It was dark, obviously. It was extremely rough weather, and that individual, only an hour earlier, was not wearing a PFD, and because of the state of the conditions on the back deck, decided on the basis of the training and the conversations we had, he was going to go inside and put his PFD on. That crew member was in the water for in excess of 40 minutes. While the PFD certainly worked, it had no strobe light and no ability as far as our personal locator beacons to actually pinpoint that particular crew. So they went back along their tracks, and it was just a case of listening over the sound of the engines, and that particular crewman blowing his whistle actually located him. A couple of things came from that is one, crew were finally listening to a safety message. But most importantly, and I don't shy away from this fact, the fact that he was wearing that life jacket and he was in the water for so long, it saved his life. Even though he was wearing a life jacket, the fact that it didn't have mandatory strobes or personal locator beacons, we went back and changed all the systems on our vessels, that all the vessels are now armed with AIS. Every single jacket that every single fisherman now wears, that when it is armed, a strobe light comes on, and obviously a personal locator beacon that links in with the rest of our fleet with AIS. Which, God forbid, if we do have another incident, one, the life jacket will keep his head out of the water, and secondly, the strobe and the AIS should make sure that he's not in the water for 40 minutes. Hopefully it's 5 to 10 at the absolute most. I don't think there's any doubt that the event shocked people. It could have quite easily gone the other way. That we could have had a death on our hands in the industry once again, which would have just been incredibly sad. You obviously get an immediate response. You suddenly have a lot of crew, if not the majority of the crew within your entire fleet, wearing that sort of equipment to make sure that it doesn't happen to them. That said, when it's not front of mind and there's been no incidents for the rest of the season, it would be prudent to assume that the use of PFDs has dropped off, which is extraordinary. So from a cultural perspective, we need to start getting it across not only our fleet but the entire industry that it's acceptable to wear PFDs. It has now been proven multiple times, not only with our organisation but the incident that we've just had, that PFDs do save lives, so why wouldn't they wear them the whole time? And that's the great challenge we've got. We have to go a little bit deeper than just a simple training regime and safety management system and touch on it culturally, where people accept it, that things like PFDs and stuff like that are just part of the job, and almost to the point where they won't do the job unless they're given the required equipment. That would be a great place to be. Like anything with safety, you've got to live it. And when you're talking about small operators, particularly owner operators that have got crew underneath them, you've got to show leadership. if they see the owner of an operation or the skipper of an operation living the safety message and that safety management system day in, day out, and themselves wearing things like PFDs, crew haven't got anywhere to hide. They've got absolutely no reason not to live and breathe safety, and then it's contagious. You know, when they go to the next operation, there's almost to a point where the boat that I just came from, everyone wore PFDs, including the owner of the business, including the skipper of the business. Why aren't we in this operation? So it's a long road, but it just takes one or two operators to step out from the crowd and just make it the norm.